All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. You're watching the Zach and Matt Show, and we have a very special guest on today, Mike Broihier. He is the candidate who is running to take on Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, Matt, fantastic to be here, and I appreciate you. Know you're not feeling well, so I appreciate you putting the effort in to spend some time with me today.
I appreciate you coming on. So, before we begin, I just want to thank you as well as your wife for your service in the U.S. Marines. And that also leads me into my first question. What was your background before getting into politics? Like, where did you go to school? What inspired you to run?
Um, I did my undergraduate work at Rutgers in New Brunswick, Rutgers College back then, Rutgers University now, I guess, and was a political science major, but also finished another major in English at the same time. So both kind of not too applicable to what I do now as a farmer. But I joined the Marines when I was in college. Had a lot of my friends had gone to the Marines right after high school. My dad was a Marine. Lynn's dad was a Marine. Kind of runs in the family, and so I joined a great program that allowed me to go to college, and then do my training in summertime. And then once I graduated in '84, started on my career in the Marine Corps, and was an artilleryman, and I served basically, all over the world, every place except Central and South America. I've did my first assignment in Japan for a year and a half, and deployed to Korea, places like that. That was great. Went to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and was in a Marine Expeditionary Unit in the Mediterranean for 6 months, special operations capable, and that was really great. Got to work with a lot of our NATO allies and see a real different side of the Navy Marine Corps team. As captain, I was stationed in 29 Palms, California, commanded a couple artillery batteries out there, and went to Somalia, Mogadishu 92, 93, as a provisional rifle company commander. That was very, very great and transformative. But after that, the Marine Corps said, this guy's had enough, and sent me to grad school for 2 years. And I got an MS degree from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, and finished up, spent 2 years in Korea, 2000 to 2002, as the Marine Corps' war planner in public Korea. And then my last 3 years, I was teaching at UC Berkeley. And so I met my wife in California, and she was on active duty at the time, and I retired. She switched to the reserves, and we became farmers. Neither of us have no experience. We just bought a lot of books and did a lot of reading, and bought a farm in Kentucky. And we've done a bunch of stuff, usual typical sustainable agriculture, grass-fed beef, pastured pork and poultry, but our main crop is all natural asparagus. So yeah, it's all credit to my wife. It grows like crazy here, and she did the research, and no one's growing it. And so, as a matter of fact, probably in a week or two, it'll be coming up, and just go, great guns all through the rest of the summer. I don't know who's going to pick it yet, but so we've been on the farm here for 15 years and done a couple little things on the side. My wife was involved in public health. She was a preparedness planner for our county. Kind of timely with the coronavirus coming around. I think people are dusting off all those plans she wrote 12 years ago. And because the techniques are the same for mitigating it. And I was a reporter, then editor of our local newspaper here, County Weekly, and third oldest newspaper in Kentucky, which was awesome. And my wife got sent to Afghanistan in 2009 and 10. And she came back and said, dude, it's a crazy place. You have to go. So then I got a job there as a defense contractor in Afghanistan. And then subsequently our son went to Afghanistan. So we're 100% on the old forever wars. But all that being said, kind of minding our own business here on the farm and enjoying our pastoral life. And just the last 3 years watching this country, I think, slide towards a ditch of authoritarianism. When you got a small farm and you can raise all your own food, and we can generate our own energy with the wind turbine and stuff, but it's easy just to push the gate shut and say we're going to be okay. But it's kind of not the way I'm made, kind of not the way my wife is made. So we're like, okay, what's going on here? And when there was a realization that Donald Trump is a symptom and Mitch McConnell is a problem, people like him are the problem. And as a Kentuckian, felt kind of uniquely positioned to take him out. And Kentucky has run kind of middle of the road, nice guys and men and women against him for the last 35 years. And they get creamed every single time. So I thought my resume as a retired combat veteran, as a teacher, and as a farmer, which goes a heck of a long way in Kentucky, put me in a unique position to take on the Grim Reaper and take him out.
I mean, that's a really diverse background. You've been all over the place. I'm curious, how did you first learn about universal basic income? Because I think for a lot of former Yank supporters, still Yank supporters like me, that's anytime we see anyone running on this kind of newish idea of universal basic income, it grabs our attention. So I'm curious, what was your own personal discovery of UBI, and why did you decide to include it in your platform?
Well, actually, I wish I could say I was on the cutting edge of this, but really not. I backed into it from the beginning. Well, since I declared my candidacy in July, my platform has been economic and social justice for all. And I used to think of those as two discrete things. And the more I studied about it and refined my thinking on it, I started realizing that social and economic justice are just inextricably linked. You can't separate them. But to the point, though, my son is a Yank supporter. And, he's just a really big-hearted kid. By the way, just not too long ago, gave us our first grandchild. Thank you, Ben.
Wow,
but Ben was the Yank guy. Oh, I had nothing to do with it, but thanks, she's wonderful. But anyways, so Ben, I asked him, because this is the first time he's really taken an interest in a candidate of his own. And in our discussions, he said, he just values life, and he just respects life, and he sees value in any kind of work. And so, I started looking into this, and I brought on some campaign staffers from the Yank campaign, and they fortunately introduced me to Scott Santos, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and I wanted to make sure I didn't ask Scott dumb questions when we first met. So I read everything I could from the World Economic Forum, and the more I read, the more convinced I became that this kind of really jived with my feelings about social and economic justice, particularly as a rural Kentuckian. Small towns do not have the resiliency that big cities and big industries do, particularly farmers. I'm a farmer. Just every single week we see another farm go for sale, we lose another family farm, and they get rolled up into kind of mega farms, which leads us towards monoculture and bad for the environment and everything else. But I really value family farms, and particularly now, if we're looking at the global supply chain being interrupted, family farms had a layer of resiliency to our food supply chain. That could become very important very, very quickly. Having a mountain of soybeans on a loading dock somewhere does not feed a community, not for very long. So, to answer your question, I backed into it. It was just a fortunate coincidence to able to talk to Scott and have him walk me through all my rookie questions about UBI, all the typical things that people come with. Luckily, I read his FAQ first. It was like, okay, went through it. I checked off all my rookie questions and became more and more convinced that this really works for rural Kentucky, works for Appalachia, and I can't see it not working for the rest of the Commonwealth or the rest of the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Scott is now, I think, your senior economic advisor as well.
Yeah, quite a shock. He's just a smart dude, and I was so pleased when he said that he would, he'd volunteer to do that. It's been a gift, and being able to have someone who's been really thinking about this for a long time to help refine my ideas, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. You brought up farming, and I'm curious, especially since you're a farmer yourself, what is it that, and I know, obviously, as you said, farming is a very important topic in Kentucky. What do you think is going wrong for farmers currently, and how do you think we improve that as a society?
Well, I think we've lost a couple of things. I talked about already the loss of the family farm, and one thing that characterized family farms was diversity. Not just diversity in raising their own food and feeding their friends and neighbors in their communities, but also biodiversity the fact that we're not all growing one strain of Monsanto corn or Monsanto soybeans, which is, no exaggeration, a single genetic flaw away from a disaster. And, the big farms lend themselves towards really abusive agricultural practices that are bad for the environment. And, so that's why I'm a fan of the family farm, and also just the tradition. And what I like about UBI is the fact that I'm guessing that if we had UBI, we would not be losing family farms the way we are. The fact that extra padding every single month to the adult members of every family would probably mean that farms passed down from grandparents to parents to children would stay in that family, and the knowledge gets passed on too. Lynn and I started farming without grandpa, to steer us in the right direction. And our list of failures is impressive and kind of hysterical in some things that we did wrong. But that's how you learn. But it might be better if I had someone said, "Yeah, I may not want to try that."
Yeah.
But so, and my problem, the temptation is to use UBI as kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And every time you see a problem, you say UBI will fix it. But in this particular case, and it's not just the farmers, but it's rural communities too. My local community happens to have a very rich benefactor who buys up every old abandoned building and fixes it up and then seeds buildings in it, seeds businesses in it. But not every community is like that. You shouldn't be relying on literally a millionaire to be keeping our economy afloat and taking up that delta needed to start a business and the risks associated with it, and then getting it through to the point where it can pay the bills. And that's where I see UBI particularly working well in small communities, rural communities.
Yeah, 100%. Another issue that I know is very important in Kentucky, and another one that you have a bit of firsthand experience in, because I saw on your website that when the farm's busy or during the winter, that you'll be a substitute teacher. What do you think? Which is really admirable, by the way. What do you think we need to do for our teachers as well as our students to increase just our overall output that we're getting from our education system, specifically for Kentucky?
Well, I think Kentucky actually surprised me. They got rid of the old percent to college as the gold standard for grading school districts. And, and so what they've gone with is successful transition to adulthood, which means not just going to college, but getting a job, getting a trade, just doing something other than not doing anything. And so I really appreciated that, the fact that they value the idea that any kind of work is valuable, whatever it is you're doing, and as long as it makes you happy. And with our son, the kind of the thing, our view always was that college was not important. What was important was he found something that made him happy and fulfilled. And so I think more of an emphasis on allowing people, taking away stigma of vocational training, encouraging people to go into any kind of work that interests them. And even in our own school district here, we have an area technical center associated with the high school, but there might as well be a wall between them. It's what they occupy the same building, but they're two separate worlds. And I wish we had a education system where kids could seamlessly move back and forth the two worlds, and not being any stigma attached to doing something that you want to pursue. That's going to be a fulfilling life for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, Kentucky's got some very specific problems about in our education system. We're one of the few states, a handful of states, that teachers do not participate in Social Security. And so they are not eligible for Social Security. And their retirement fund has been grossly underfunded for the past almost 2 decades. And now we're at the point where it's in great danger. And the odd thing is that not only if you're a teacher not in Kentucky, not only are you not eligible for Social Security, but if your spouse who's not a teacher predeceases you, you only get a very, very small part, like a third of what you'd get if you've not even worked at all, which is just complete. It's called the GPO, Government Pension Offset. And that's something I can't affect the first part of it, but the second part of it, the GPO, is something that I would really happily work on in Washington, because it just doesn't make any sense that if someone never works, they get their spouse's full pension. But if you work as a teacher, you get a third of it. Just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, everyone who's watching, Mike has a ton of policies on his website, so we're not going to be able to get through everything during this interview. But if you do want to learn more, it's going to be on screen, Mike for KentuckyKY.com. And if you have any questions as you're watching, feel free to ask away. And my next question is going to be on healthcare. And this is, again, something that you have a bit of personal experience with, because as you said, your wife works in that field. I saw on your website that you're for a public option, and it's in the current system. But if Mitch McConnell and the Republicans were to get together and try to repeal ACA, that you'd be in favor of Medicare for all. Would you just be able to talk a little bit about what your feelings are about the healthcare system, like, and where we need to improve it?
Well, in the perfect world, I think we have a single payer system, and I don't think it's, I guess it would look like Medicare for all, but I think that the ACA plus public option is the most disruptive, least disruptive economic way to get there. I like Canada's system, and there's tons of anecdotal. You always hear anecdotal stories about people coming from Canada to get surgery done in the United States, but I know a heck of a lot more people personally who go to Canada to get stuff done. Dental work. One of my neighbors here is a small businessman. He's diabetic. He travels to Canada twice a year to buy his insulin. And he saves $5,000 a year, and that's including his 2 trips to Canada. So, I mean, to talk about the immediate problems, and the temptation is to call them low-hanging fruit, because they're easily solved. Because to call them low-hanging fruit kind of diminishes their importance. But for example, allowing Health and Human Services to negotiate directly with pharmaceutical companies to negotiate drug prices, that is literally a stroke of the pen kind of thing. And every other major modern country negotiates prescription drug prices with pharmaceutical companies, and we do not. Particular, I have a particular case where I had to take a medication one time that cost 4 times as much as it did in Canada, and it's made here in the United States.
Yeah.
If I'd wandered off the street with the prescription as a U.S. citizen in Canada, I would have paid a quarter of the price. And if I was Canadian, it would have been free. Now, I'm lucky enough to have insurance, but many Kentuckians aren't. And, even now, I mean, we probably put, I think, 340,000 Kentuckians on insurance under ACA. And Mitch McConnell is saying he's going to redouble his efforts to gut it, tear it out root and branch, as he said. And that's a third of a million of his constituents have gotten healthcare under ACA, and he is just, I don't know, I can't imagine the thinking that goes into saying, well, they'll forgive me come November.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings.
Putting this just to see if that works.
Hey, we're doing a little technical difficulty. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
A second. Oh man. Hey, this ain't working.
I think you're muted now.
All right. Any luck?
Yeah, I can hear you. We're good.
Yeah, apparently my audio was very, very crackly going out to the internet. Could be my high quality rural broadband. I don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing. Do you have your headphones in? Because I can hear a bit of an echo.
We're gonna have to go back to this. Sorry, dude. All right, got me?
Yeah. I can hear you. It's a little crackly, but it brings up what you just said. And I've noticed this too, because I was following Andrew Yang's campaign all around rural Iowa and rural New Hampshire, and the internet service in certain towns and areas in terms of cellular and broadband, it's just not up to par to where I think we should be as a society in the 21st century. What are your feelings on that?
Well, I'm subject to it, so I have very strong feelings about it. But I think most into light is the fact that as we are addressing this coronavirus outbreak, the pandemic, the the first thing that CDC was mentioning in their social distancing schemes was for schools to close down and use distance learning, which is fine if your students have got rural broadband, A, that they can afford, and B, it actually gets to their I know an awful lot of people who are on some very, very tenuous broadband, some that have none at all. And I'll shoot you a link to a video that I did from my barn after we had 4 days of outages, because that's the only place I could have strong enough cellular service to send the video out. But the fact that the government's saying, hey, school systems, you need to do distance learning, doesn't work. And not just the country, but in urban areas or places where people just cannot afford it. They can't afford the computers, they can't afford the devices to say, well, this is how we're going to teach our children. For my personal, I have a telephone pole on my property, a light pole on my property that was actually part of the rural electrification program. Every single farm got the power run to the farmhouse and one light pole. And even if I shut off power to my house, this thing will still go on because it's part of the almost centuries old rural electrification program. And I look at broadband as a utility, that it is a critical part. It's right up there with water and electricity these days. And if we particularly want to move the economy forward, and we want people to participate in the economy, part of a just transition to a green economy is going to be making this accessible for everybody. And if people can't afford it, or in rural areas it just doesn't exist, I think it should be part of a program, a national program. I really believe the government is good at a few things, and infrastructure is one of them. And we need to treat broadband as infrastructure. We had a program here called Wired Kentucky, and I think the startup was, I don't know, whatever was 3,000 miles of fiber optic cable, and it's started in 2017, and it's a dead dog. And I think that the costs have ballooned by maybe 1,000%. And but that was relying on a public-private partnership. I think that this should be a national priority because it is just and fair that everyone, particularly in places like places like Kentucky, where we've had an extractive economy for almost 2 centuries, and we've been left holding the economic and environmental bag on the timbering and the coal mining of Kentucky. So I think this is time that everyone, coal from Kentucky and the rest of the Appalachian states built our great cities. And now it's time to bring us all along to enjoy enjoy modern life.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think everyone deserves access to high-speed internet. Do you have the headphones all the way plugged in? 'Cause I can still hear it echo a bit.
All right, how are we doing?
Let me try. All right, I don't hear myself. Oh, no, I do a little.
I hear you.
All right. What is an issue that on your platform that you're personally want to share with the audience that maybe might get overlooked if someone's just scrolling through your website?
I'll tell you, I think one of them is because it comes and goes in the news. I've been a real advocate of gun sense, common sense gun reform. And I hate to keep going back to living in the country, but I mean, everybody around here has a gun. That's just part of being a farmer. It's one of the tools in your farm's equipment shed. And so it's a well-armed environment here. But I think that, and again, going back to the low-hanging fruit, two of the bills that Mitch McConnell has stalled on is universal background checks. And I support, this will not be an issue until the next mass school shooting, which hopefully will not happen anytime soon. But then it'll leap back up into public conscience for 2 weeks, and then it'll go away again.
They just forget about it.
So universal background checks, the transfer of any firearm, and not just for sales, but if you want a loan, if someone inherits a gun, the NICS system actually is literally instantaneous, and it's not expensive. And so I think every transfer of firearm should go through the NICS system. Also, I think that in the Violence Against Women Act, which is another bill that Mitch McConnell is not bringing to a vote on the floor of the Senate, includes red flag laws, and the fact that people who've got a emergency protective order filed against them by an abused spouse or domestic partner or child, I think it needs to be able to be protected through the courts for someone who's, proven to be a danger to them. And both these bills have got bipartisan support. They came out of the House with bipartisan support, and they have bipartisan support in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell just sitting on it because he can. And I think it's fundamentally the problem with the Senate Majority Leader. I don't think the founders could ever have imagined that someone would accrue so much power and so much influence to basically thwart the will of the people through their elected representatives from getting anything done. And that is why that's why he has to go, and that's why I've dedicated myself to knocking him out, because we need to go back to separation of power and try to turn the Senate back into the world's most deliberative body again, where we get things done for America.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I own a firearm, and I think red flag laws should be everywhere. I think it's a great idea. So the fact that, Mitch McConnell, who's the leader in the Senate, is not even allowing bills like this to reach the floor really is a shame. And that leads me into my next question. Obviously, as you said in the beginning, you referenced how there's been a lot of primary challengers to McConnell, and just Republicans in general, reign supreme in Kentucky. What makes your candidacy stand out to where you'll be able to draw right-leaning voters to come over to you in a general election?
Well, Matt, I told you in my intro, there's not anybody in Kentucky who isn't a friend or a relative of a farmer, a teacher, or a veteran. And just being a farmer alone, like a real farmer, spending hours a day bent over picking their crops and feeding the community, that goes a heck of a long way with people here in Kentucky. And I've done a fairly good job honing my skills on communicating that, as writing several hundred editorials in a local newspaper, trying to get year after year progressive ideas across to a sometimes reluctant readership. But what I did find is that you can communicate these ideas. You can convince people if you do it tactfully, and most importantly, got to be right. Hey, I hate to cut this short, man. This is really fun talking to you, but we got another interview stacked up, so I'll probably better jam.
Yeah, for sure. Real quickly, someone just said, first Nerds for Yang, now the Zach and Matt show. Dang it, Mike, I may just have to donate again. So what I see your website listed there. How do people learn more about your candidacy? How do they donate? And when is voting day?
Well, the primary for Kentuckians is May 19th. And so before then, if they'd like to read my entire platform, it's at mikeforky.com, mikeforky.com. And that has also links to Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, et cetera, and also news stories and links to, if they want to ask questions directly, that's cool too. But yeah, so donation, there's a prominent @blue link. They can go to mikeforky.com and donate, which would be great. Love to have it.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much.
Okay, my friend, I hope you feel better.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good luck out there on the trail. Take care.